Good morning, everyone. Hello. Just waking up. I wanted to. Someone asked me what the SV meant on my tattoo, and the crab shell. That's an SV. It's backwards, but it's SV. It stands for a Spork Victory, and let me tell you the story about that. Um, so, so essentially, Taylor Swift's the original carving that I made of this mermaid is one that I did for Taylor Swift, of her, inspired by her, and she's playing a crab. So essentially, the music, Taylor Swift's music, it stands for Spork Victory. Well, the Spork Victory, the SV can be seen on the bottom of Taylor Swift's Reputation album cover. He's right there. So when they made the cover, Swift was cut off. Her name was cut off, and the SV remained, which is why I put the SV on the crab shell. So, but there's a story. There's a much greater story than that. So when I was in Norway last year, um, in Norway the license plates always start with two letters, which represent uh, uh, they represent those two letters represent something, and it's the place where each car was purchased. So anywhere the initial purchase. So the initial purchase of any car in Norway will second spork. Yep. Yep. Mm-hmm. When will that be completed? Okay. Okay. Thank you. So 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 in Norway, all the license plates have two initials on the front of them, and there's a couple hundred different possible initials that you can have, and you can go online and you can look them up. But they stand for where the initial purchase of the car was made. So no matter then that those two letters will be with that car forever. So so I always saw that those. I mean, it's kind of, I don't know. I can't explain why, but I always saw those two license plates, and you kind of, for me anyways, I would kind of acknowledge that they're there. License plates are one of those things that maybe you pay attention to them, maybe you don't. I don't know um, how that works. In Michigan, there never seems that years ago in Michigan they used to do kind of the same thing, I heard, but they don't do that anymore. Um, I never paid any attention really to license plates unless it was like something that was a vanity plate that said someone's name, or I just never really, every once in a while you might see some license plate number that looks interesting, that's unusual, but normally license plates don't stand out. But when you're in Norway for a while, weeks after weeks go by, you see these license plates over and over and over again, and if no one tells you this, you start wondering what these two letters mean, because you'll just start seeing, then you'll start, if you stay in one place, you'll start seeing two letters that seem, or you'll start seeing that some of these are more common than others, and that's obvious for obvious reasons once you discover that it represents where the car was purchased, because obviously most people are going to probably buy the cars in one place near where everyone lives. So you end up seeing the cars that are most often purchased right where everyone lives, usually in one area. So that's like if you live in Sutton's Bay, most people drive a car that was bought in Traverse City, kind of a thing. So in Oda, in Oda, the two letters that represent a car purchase in Oda are TS, which stands for Taylor Swift in my mind. So when you're in Oda, you'll see TS more than almost any. I think you see that more than any other initial. And when I say so any car purchased in Oda in that region, I'm not sure how big the region is, but like I said, throughout all of Norway, there's like 300 or 400 of these possible uh, initials that can be in the front of a license plate. So what are the chances that Oda happened to, the most common two initials for the area where Oda is, for the cars that most people buy in, most people that buy a car in Oda or nearby Oda, which is what most people will do, buy a car nearby where they live, it's TS, which stands for Taylor Swift, in my mind. And that just was a random thing that happened, that happened to be that happened to be a characteristic of this place where I was living in Norway. So about halfway through the summer, and I was talking about Taylor Swift all the time and posting her pictures all the time, so everyone was probably seeing this too, and I imagine other people in the town started to think, oh, TS they see on their license plate, now that means Taylor Swift. I thought it was kind of funny, totally unintended. I didn't go to Oda because it had a TS license plate on them. But halfway through the summer, more and more, I had an unusual vehicle, an old Ford truck that I bought. A lot of times people will say that men have patterns, or people have patterns, and they'll know where someone's going. It's easy to kind of find out where people are going in the town that I was living in, because there's only a couple ways in and out of the town. So you can only go so far unless you're going to be going on a long distance trip somewhere. So it's kind of easy to try to figure out where somebody is, and if you really want to try. So for a good part of the summer, in the fall, I was going to the same place every single afternoon to get rocks, and and as people. So the way I was thinking about it is there were people that were supporting me, and since I was a new person in the town, and since I was an artist, kind of an independent individual, they had to find unique ways of getting to know me. Of showing that the community supports me, of bringing me into the community. So one of the ways that they did that, one day when I was driving up to get rocks, there was this part of the road that there were several cars parked on the side of the road, which was unusual. And as I drove up next to them, they all had the initials LS, which is another common. You see quite a few LS initials on cars in Norway, on the license plates. But they were obviously placed there all together so that I would see them. And then there were a couple that were placed like way kind of off the road, kind of in the middle of the road, kind of like to get my attention first. And then you just see all this lineup of all these LS cars. And immediately when that happened, they did that. It was like, I became like, everything I saw, all the cars that I saw, it's like, what do those initials mean? And then because people could band in a group with and together and present those letters together to me or to anyone, and if they all had a very specific kind of meaning, you could tell it was being done on purpose. Now it wasn't. No one was trying. No one. It was all in good fun. Is what it is. It's a good fun thing, and it's kind of a creative kind of way of communicating or joking around. But it took a while for me to kind of understand what was going on there. But so for the next half of the whole summer or the fall, people were playing games with this whole license plate thing, parking, and sometimes and a lot of times you don't know if they are or not. So it's like every car that's going by, and it's a constant kind of thing that your mind's kind of seeing. So it became kind of a really unusual kind of. I never experienced this before, and so all these cars had all these license plates that were had different initials, and people would be, but you just don't know if anyone was doing anything intentionally to get your attention or not, because a lot of people probably weren't even thinking about it at all. But then sometimes you obviously could tell that things were intentionally done a certain way, so that you would notice it with the license plates. But again, it's so halfway through this. So after this had all happened, that's when I saw the SV on the Taylor Swift's album, and I'm just like, what are the chances that SV Sport Victory are on Taylor Swift's album. So I started, it was kind of a joke, but but it is kind of it's quite a coincidence that SV is on the bottom of that album, and that's why I put the SV on the crab shell, because of the license plate thing over in Norway, and still, if I go back to Norway, I'll never see those license plates again. I always just immediately when I see the license plates now in Norway, I think of what does those initials stand for, and that's kind of the story about the license plates and the SV from the album, and that's the story about that. So, and there's more to it. I could tell you some of so there was SV, there was PP, profile picture, SV, Sport Victory, TS, Taylor Swift, LS, Lay Spork. I mean, BS, Bev Spork. So there were all these initials. J, there were several J ones, because, J. So there was a whole handful of different initials on license plates in Norway when I was there that had that were very obviously could be looked at and could represent something that had to do with me, those ones I listed. So there was probably about 10 of them. So after I saw that people could band in a group and park together with those license plates, and when they were to do that, you knew that it was done on purpose, like not to get your attention, to see that, to make you think that. So once you realize that could happen, you always kind of, and it happened more than once in different ways. But once you saw that happen once it happened to you a couple times, and once you realized that there were people out there in the community that wanted you to get that, to see that, you didn't know, you could expect it happening at any time. You just didn't even know. And it happened a few more times where it was obviously done on purpose. And I can't remember all the different examples, but it happened around my building, and it happened in places, and you just didn't know when. So, and then the next question is, well, why were they doing that? Well, they were doing that because, like I said, because they wanted me to get to feel comfortable in the community, is how I looked at it. And by people doing that was a way for them to get my attention, to show me that they're thinking about me, to show me that there, there's people out here that, and like I said, you couldn't. There's lots and lots of times you'll never know if someone's doing it to make you see that on purpose or not. So it becomes this thing, but sometimes it's really obvious that it was done on purpose, with cars parked in a certain place that were all the same. And I mean, the chances of that just being a random thing is almost impossible. So you just knew that it was done on purpose, and it's one of these things that it is kind of crazy once you start to realize it and notice it, but if you think positively and you realize, then it becomes a way in which it was a good thing. So, but again, it was a new experience for me to see all that happen like that, and I don't know. Yeah, it's. I look, if that's something that Americans would never do, I don't know. It's like a creative thing I could see that could start being something that people would do in a small community. When you have license plates that all have the same, that have initials that could mean something possibly. And I think I happened to be someone that had so many initials that were related to this, that were in this town that I was in, that could be very obviously represent me, like LS, like Spork. TS, Taylor Swift, BS, Bev Spork, K. I think there were several that were just obviously like initials that could represent me in some way. Oh, ST, Spork Tile Art. These were all like some of the most common. And what are the chances that these license plates were all like the most common ones in Oda? Because if you were to go up to Trondheim, or if you were to go just an hour drive away, you wouldn't see those license plates nearly as much. And granted, you probably what you would say to yourself, well, you're just going to think something of the ones that are there, and it's going to seem like, yeah, granted, you would. That's true. But if you go up to, but if I go up to Trondheim or something, it is not the same, because I went up to Trondheim during all this, and you you would see so many different ones that you don't start thinking that it's not the same. But when you're in a small community and you see these all the time, and people know that, it's like something that's like a little game that you can play. So, and I never played it because I was by myself. I didn't have anyone to play it with, but I could see how it could become a little game, which I'd never experienced. But it really was happening. Anyway, that was the story. I got to get to work.